Great. So sorry that last video kind of cut out a little bit. I wanted to go widescreen into kind of an 800 by 600 so you can see what I'm typing a little bit better here. This program has a lot of good ingredients. You know, we've got the brain center, and really all that matters to the compiler is what happens within the main. So for example, if the first move we make is to make a market, we can go into that implementation. We say, okay, the first thing it does is make a market, and we're going to pass it, and we're going to say, okay, please make 6,000 stocks inside of that. So the integer that we pass it is going to be the size of the market. So we create a very traditional for loop, a regular for loop that will run, 6,000 times, and every time we run, we make a new stock. So if you go ahead and click that, that leads us over to the stock. So every time the stock runs, we run the stocks constructor. So it sets its price, the industry it belongs to, the number of stock that are available initially, or the IPO, initial public offering, and then of course the symbol's name. And we set, the symbol, and you guys are going to make a much cooler set symbol. Right now my stocks just create an A or B. You guys need to create, A through Z. So it will make a very rich, very authentic looking stock market. You create the industry the same way. I only put in a few industries here. My stocks only are fishing stocks, really. So I'd like for you to add in, 20 different industries there. So if I just get back to the market creates 6,000 odd stocks of that way. Then we also have the ability to print the market, which just prints out all the stuff that you just created. Now the source code that I've made already does all this stuff, so you kind of get that for free. It's up on GitHub. I don't recommend downloading my code and just using it. I recommend you just code it by yourself. I don't recommend that you use my code. It's up there. Definitely use it. You can basically type what I typed, but I don't recommend that you just download my project and boot off of that. It won't have the same success. And also, if you make your project inside of the GitHub repository, every time you update it, you'll overwrite all the stuff you just made. So, you run into a little bit of a catch-22. Let me say this. The GitHub is just like a God's gift to programming, where it's just the best thing that ever happened to programming instruction ever. Where, here's our term project with our classes, and let's say you wanted to make your own, market class. Here's wonderfully clear code that's there. It just, I couldn't ask for a nicer demonstration of working production Java. So that, you could just kind of print that out maybe and use it. The last thing you want to do is copy and paste stuff, because you want to get it into your fingers. Your fingers are the source of memorization, and if your fingers do it, you will remember it, and you will do it like playing music in the future. And that's precisely what you want, in this IT industry. So let's say we've got our market, and we can print the market. That's great. Now the next piece, if you go back to those requirements, is we want to find a buyer. It's got a budget and a name and a portfolio to boot. And so here we are making us a buyer, and we'll navigate to the buyer class, and we establish a budget and a buyer name, and we prove that we've made him or her. Then we create a number of transactions, and this is the piece of the project that I'm going to leave incomplete, and I'll let you guys figure out the solution. So you get down here into the build the random portfolio piece, which is kind of the core of the exercise. And if you go to build random portfolio, you're actually going to get a snapshot of the market, once it's built. And so we're going to see, build a random portfolio. You should actually, so that's the market. And what you're doing is this is what I want to review with you guys. You actually want to grab a stock from that market and put it in your portfolio. And this is what you've got to do right here. Now, just to get started, your portfolio is defined up here, up at the top of the buyer class. And a portfolio is a real authentic class that we made. And it contains an array list of transactions. Now, a transaction is a custom class that you guys made. It's not a piece of Java. It's something that you guys built for the sake of this project. And a transaction has a couple of pieces of data in it. It should have a symbol. It should have a price. It also has the number of stock that you happen to purchase, and then it's the identifier or the name of the buyer. And that can be negotiated here because the name of the buyer is going to be present with the the buyer, him or herself. But you want to set these as public, right? So that we could set them later. And then you want to create a portfolio that contains transactions. Now, a transaction is not the stock itself. There's a difference between a stock and a transaction. A stock is a real live stock that's on the marketplace. It's in the index. It has a price, as a symbol. But when you buy the stock, you have a certain number of those stock, right? You've contained issues of that stock. And what you actually have is you don't have the stock. You actually have a transaction where you have the stock when it was valued at a certain price. So when you're going to establish the portfolio, you're going to establish really a series of transactions in that portfolio. So what I've included here is kind of a little formula where you want to take the buyer's budget, get the number of his transactions, and then determine the APT, and that's the amount per transaction. What that creates is a budget that you can spend per transaction. And a portfolio is simply a number of transactions and a certain allocation of money per transaction based upon budget. So there's a little bit of arithmetic that comes into play here. So first we get the market, and then we randomly choose a stock to buy. So we get that market, we send the buyer a photograph of the market. And then here's the cool part. We're going to get a random number that's between 0 and 6,000. Now, the market has 6,000 stocks in it. So what it's going to do is it's randomly going to grab a stock. And this is going to happen quickly. So we're going to take the market, and we're going to get that random number from the market's M, or market. And so this gives you a stock.
What's L here?
And L is just, you can name it whatever, but the L is the name of the stock from here on. So if you want to print it, it's going to system out. Random stock details are going to be the stock number, the stock that you chose is L dot symbol and L dot price. And that's based upon that L right there in stock, which is an important sort of norm. Now here on out, here's where the solution to the program will take place, where you've done a lot of work up until now, and now you need to get the price of the chosen stock and then divide the allocation per transaction by the stock's price. And that's going to be the number of that stock you can do in that transaction. So you're going to say how many, and then we're going to prepare to make a transaction at this point. And you're going to define the variables necessary to make a transaction or a purchase of stock. And a transaction has a symbol and a price, the number of stock purchased. The number of stock purchased is always going to be the budget per transaction, or the APT, divided by the stock's current price. And that's going to make sense to you guys. And so you need to define that here. And then after you've made your transaction, or you say transaction T is equal to a new transaction. And then you set the variables. Then it's really simple. Then you're going to add the transaction onto the portfolio P belonging to this this buyer. Okay.
What's L dot symbol? Symbol references.
Like for example, Yahoo is YHOO.
That was defined in brain center.
Defined in market. Yeah, that's defined randomly in market.
As a string.
Yep, and it's actually defined as part of the stock. So the stock defines, the stock causes the markets, the market causes the stocks to be created.
And it generates a 4-digit string.
That's right, a 4-character.
4 characters.
Exactly.
4 characters. And that's in market. Okay, I see. And then when you put L dot symbol, it
Well, it kind of proves that the stock was made. And it says, here's the symbol that you generated, that your code generated. And then here's the price that your algorithm generated too. So if I can wrap up here, the project kind of creates a large, realistic market of stocks. Then it creates one buyer who fills up his or her portfolio with a random number of transactions. And then that's it. And then you're able to submit your project. And we'll talk about how to submit the project. So here, I'll stop the video right now because we've done enough explanation. Then we can get involved with your questions at this point.